Hello, English 431. This is Chris once again, talking you through week 7 of the course. I'm going to try to adjust my screen a little bit. This is Guardian's Trail, by the way. If I haven't mentioned this before, it is up 32 until you come to what's called 10 Mile House Road. There's a 1 mile in Chico. There's a 5 mile in Chico. Does it end there? No, it does not. 10 mile, 15 mile, 20 mile, all kinds of fun trails on the other side of the park that you might not be familiar with. And this one is fantastic because it's got 1,000-foot cliffs that if you're not careful, you'll just ride your bike right off. Don't do that. It's actually further away than that, but something to do over spring break, maybe. Let's talk about what's going on this week in English 431. I'm going to share my screen once again, and we'll talk about where we are. First things first, let me tell you this one thing. Please, you all are doing great. You're doing wonderful work. You're working extra hard. Keep it up. You're going to make it to spring break. You're going to get some time to rest. I hope that you'll have a little bit of time to recharge and to kind of refocus so that we can hit the rest of the semester with a new attitude and a new kind of spring-like ethos that'll guide us through the rest of the semester. I hope you are taking care of yourself. Exercising self-care is important during this pandemic, which is continuing. And so my heart goes out to any of you. If you've got any questions about anything related to the course, just let me know. First things first, I am sorry that I didn't get this video out to you sooner. I had a bunch of things going on, and then also I didn't. I must have checked the mail like 5 times. I mean the literal mail. I went out of the mailbox. So I don't know where the time goes, and I apologize. I should have had this video made and out to you by noon or 10 o'clock in the morning, and it just didn't happen. First things first, what I'm hoping that you're going to do is that you're going to share a draft of your paper as a Google Doc by dumping the links into week 7 of Google Currents. Now, this is a little bit tricky if you all have not done this before, but since most of you are English majors, I'm assuming that since you've worked with various people in this department, you've probably run into Google Docs before. We use Google Docs a lot in the English department. It seems like a really great way to share writing, to collaborate on writing, and for us to be in a document at the same time, working side by side, co-authoring even. So that's one of the things that I would keep in mind as this process goes forward is the papers that you turn into me will all be in Google Docs. Now, the one thing that's most tricky about Google Docs is getting your sharing settings right. It's one of the things that really trips new users up. So what does that mean? You've got 2 options when it comes to sharing your paper. As we've talked about before, what you do is you go to the upper right-hand corner of a Google Doc, like you'd see right here, and you would look for a share button. That would appear in blue. Someday it'll appear in blue, right here. When you click on that share button, you'll be given a screen that gives you several options. And if my computer were any slower, it would be a slug. I suppose I'm just running every program at once right now, so I'll just try to talk over it. I'm hoping this isn't going to last forever. You may face a screen like this. There are 2 of me. Don't worry about that. But one of the things that you'll see is a series of options related to who can access the document and what they can do with it. At this point, anyone on the internet can view. Now, if I wanted to change that, I could change it to only the people I add in a list. I could change it to CSU Chico, but that means they'd need to sign in order to access it with their Chico State username and password. That is their portal ID. Or I could just say anyone with the link. Now, that gives them access to the document. What do you want them to be able to do? To view, to edit, to comment. Comment, then edit. The best thing for us will be this editing function right here. which I'm not going to change because, of course, this is the assignments for this course. But so that's what I want you to do is I want you to share anyone on the internet with this link. That is, anybody who has access to the link can edit. Now, why would I want to do that? Because what I'm hoping that you'll do when you read other people's papers, and this is really what I'm talking about, is peer reviewing, is that you would read and respond to the drafts of at least 2 other people in class. And you would offer them a frame by frame of your mind. First things first, read the paper through and just respond as a human being would respond. Point out what you think is strong and tell people why it's strong. Point out, let's just say, what confused you and maybe why it confused you. Point out things that you'd like a little more detail on, or you'd like some explanation. You'd like a stronger connection to the reading so far in the course. Read as a reader would, right? But then maybe look at it another way, as someone who is offering suggestions for review. Now, we haven't gone too far down this road, but what you will start to be doing more actively in the latter half of the semester is you're going to be working with students and helping them to revise. We want to push revision as part of the writing process, and we want to use the writing spaces of your internship in order to guide students toward specific and focused and useful revisions. So let's practice this with the papers that we've done so far. What would that mean? Go through the paper and think about the kinds of things we have decided we want this paper to be. This is a being tutored paper. It is to offer a vivid and detailed narrative of your experience having a piece of writing tutored in the Student Learning Center or the ESL Resource Center. It is to connect to several of our readings and any readings up until this point in a rigorous and substantial way. I don't want us to just say, this reminds me of Leahy, who talked about what a writing center is, the end. But rather to take a little bit of time and point out a specific quote or phrase or idea that he was working with and how it seems that your experience in the writing center either challenges or supports that idea. That is, explain how you are making the connection between your experience and the reading. Then the final thing that I'm hoping that this paper does, after you illustrate the kinds of things that went on when you were tutored, is to offer some suggestions. Sorry, I just ate dinner. I probably have dinner all over my face. Offer some suggestions about what you take from this experience that could apply to the kinds of ways you might work with writers in the future. So putting a different hat on, I have no hat, putting a different hat on, as you start to read other people's papers, ask yourself questions about those 3 parts of the draft. How well is the story working at this point? What could the writer add to the story to make it more interesting, more vivid, and so on? 2, what kinds of connections are being made? And do you think those connections could be strengthened? How would you go about strengthening those connections? Be specific. And thirdly, what would you like then in terms of more connections to what they might do in the future? That is, how would you suggest that they start to revise that final section of the paper where they're reflecting on what they've learned and what they might bear into the future? What other kinds of connections might they be able to make, or what kinds of things has this reading experience left with you? In those kinds of ways, what I'm hoping that we will do is we will all, as a small class of, let's say, 10 students, be reading each other's drafts, and we'll be giving each other a whole bunch of commentary that we can use in order to revise. Now, what I'd hope then is that you would take that data, that input from people who have read your draft, and that you would apply it. You, as the author of the paper, putting that hat back on, you are now the author of your draft once again. You're thinking, okay, so how can I use these revision suggestions? You, of course, have the decision to make about whether to accept the ideas, to reject the ideas, or to modify the ideas as you start to revise your paper. What I would hope that you would do is you would think carefully and critically about the kinds of ways that people have responded to your work, and then integrate those comments into your draft. As far as this draft is concerned, you know, it might be better if you just left those comments in so I can see how people were responding to your paper. As you start to revise, then turn in what's known as a messy paper. What that means is a draft where you have revised extensively based on the comments you receive in Google Docs, but where you have not, I repeat, not resolved all those comments that you got in Google Docs. Because I'd just like to see what the conversation has been about this paper before I read. Sometimes I end up saying, well, I don't know if I'm agreeing with your peer critiquers. I think I might try something different. Let me know what you think. Or I might say, you know, they were right on the money and I have nothing to add. I think they really nailed it. So these kinds of things just continue the conversation that we're having about writing. And I am really looking forward to reading these drafts. Final thing, when do you turn this in? You know, you've already shared the draft of the paper in Google Docs in our week 7 links. If you don't want to do anything, if you don't want to start a whole new draft, then you don't need to worry about it. If you don't want to clean up the draft in any way, and I'm suggesting that you don't, then just leave that link in there, and those will be the draft, you know, the drafts that I'll look at. I'm hoping you all are okay with this. And I will note Christian Vancil is in another one of my classes where I'm doing something slightly different. So Christian, I hope you see this. I'm talking to you now specifically as a member of the class, English 338. You will note in your brain that I said something different for 338 people. Do that there, but do this here. I'm sorry that this is confusing, but I'm only confusing to one person in our class. I figure that's okay. That's pretty much my average. So then when you revise, try to revise by spring break or keep the paper over spring break. That's totally fine. I'm going to be gone for summer spring break. We're going to try to just get out of town for a little bit. We need to get out of town. We've been trapped in the house for a year. So I may not look at these papers immediately. In fact, I may not look at any papers until I return and we are back off of spring break. So if you feel like you want to work on your paper more, that's totally fine. Keep it, or send me an email saying, hey, don't read my paper until such and such a date. I'm still feeling really like it's not working. It's kind of janky at this point. So I do that. That's totally fine. It's completely fine. This is an unprecedented semester, and I'm really tired of saying the word unprecedented. So that's pretty much it. There is nothing else to read. There is nothing else to do. If you have posted today a link to your draft in Google Currents, then you can continue to work on your draft all of this week, and then I hope that you do. That's one of the great things about Google Docs is that you can turn in your paper but continue to work on it. Because when you share it with a professor, it is still yours. It exists in the cloud and it comes down to both of us. And whatever change is made over here is immediately updated over here because it's the same cloud document. So that's one of the things that's really cool about Google Docs, and especially working with students in your internships. That is it. This is a long video. I apologize, but I hope that you watch it and you let me know if there's any particular questions about what we're doing this week, right before spring break. Thank you.